From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day, this is Dateline Malacañang, and here are the news. Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. called for stronger regional cooperation to address energy supply disruptions as he joined the Asia Zero Emission Community or AZEC Plus online summit hosted by Japan. In his message delivered via teleconference, President Marcos underscored the Philippines' vulnerability to global oil supply shocks, citing the closure of the Strait of Hormuz in February as a major disruption that triggered fuel price increases. The president said rising diesel and liquefied petroleum gas or LPG prices have placed pressure on key sectors including transport, food supply, and manufacturing amid imported inflation. In response, the government declared a national energy emergency and rolled out the Unified Package for Livelihood, Industry, Food, and Transport or UPLIFT program to mitigate the impact. President Marcos, however, emphasized that national measures alone are insufficient. He highlighted ongoing government efforts to strengthen energy resilience, including diversifying oil sources, increasing fuel stock requirements, and developing a strategic petroleum reserve. The Philippines is also accelerating transport electrification, expanding biofuel blending, and promoting energy efficiency to reduce dependence on imported fuel. At the regional level, President Marcos backed the implementation of the ASEAN Petroleum Security Agreement or APSA, which provides mechanisms for coordinated emergency response and fuel sharing among member states. He proposed the early activation of the agreement's emergency response system, a regional study on joint oil stockpiling, and the establishment of standardized protocols for emergency fuel allocation. President Marcos also welcomed Japan's initiative to strengthen regional supply chain cooperation, noting its experience in maintaining robust petroleum reserves.
The Philippines is an archipelagic nation of 115 million people. We are mostly dependent on imported petroleum to power our transport, our industries, our hospitals, our homes. When global supply chains are disrupted, as they have been since the closure of the Strait of Hormuz on February 28th of this year, the effects arrive at our shores very swiftly and are felt severely. In the weeks following the Hormuz closure, the Philippines witnessed sharp increases in diesel and LPG prices. Our economy, which grew by 4.4% in 2025 and remains on a steady upward trajectory, is now facing imported inflation that threatens the welfare of our most vulnerable households. Our transport logistics, our food supply, our manufacturing sector are all under real severe pressure. What this crisis has confirmed is a structural truth. No single country in Asia can insulate itself from supply chain shocks of this scale by acting alone, and the Philippines stands ready to work alongside every economy represented here.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang said the country's economic team is taking steps to cushion the impact of global uncertainties on the Philippine economy. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro made the assurance following projection by the International Monetary Fund or IMF on the Philippines' growth targets. Castro noted that the external factors, including geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, continue to affect not only the Philippines but also other Asian economies.
Although sabi nga natin na hindi ginusto ng pamahalaan at ng Pangulo ang nangyayaring kaguluhan po sa Middle East, minabuti po natin na kunin na rin po ang komento ni DepDev Secretary Arsenio Balisaca patungkol po dyan. Ibibigay ko po ang kanyang mensahe and I quote, By July 2026, the World Bank will indicate whether we have met the income threshold for upper middle income status based on 2025 performance. Formal classification may require additional years of sustained results. We remain confident this will be achieved within the term of the Marcos administration. Despite geopolitical tensions and heightened uncertainty, we will stay the course in stabilizing the economy and strengthening social protection to sustain poverty reduction.
The IMF downgraded its 2016 growth forecast for the Philippines to 4.1% from 5.6% in January, based on its latest World Economic Outlook released on Tuesday. The outlook for the Philippine economy is lower than the government's 5% to 6% target and slower than the 4.4% full-year expansion in 2025. The IMF noted that the latest growth forecast was revised downward, with the war shock compounding the negative base effects from a weaker than expected 2025 outturn related to a sharp decline in public investment and confidence in the Philippines. Castro said the government is working hard to hasten and sustain the country's economic recovery. Citing Department of Economy, Planning and Development or DepDev Secretary Arsenio Balisacan's statement, Castro said the government remains optimistic that the country will stay on track toward achieving upper middle income status and sustaining poverty reduction despite challenges. She cited the ongoing efforts of economic managers led by Balisacan to stabilize the economy and maintain growth momentum. Castro noted that by July, the World Bank will indicate whether the Philippines is able to reach the upper middle income status based on its performance last year.
Alam naman natin po kung ano pong ginagawa ngayon ng economic team, pati po sa pangunguna rin po ni Secretary Arsenio Balisaca. Sinabi niya rin po ito, in I quote, most Asian economies are likely to miss their growth targets this year due to global supply chain disruptions and heightened uncertainty from the Middle East. So sa ngayon po, kahit ano po ang naranasan natin ngayon dahil dulot ng gulo dito sa Middle East, pinagsusumikapan po ng gobyerno na maibsan or maiwasan, mabawasan ang naranasan natin na hirap dulot ng krisis sa Middle East. So patuloy pa rin po ang pagpapalago ng ekonomiya.
Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang Wednesday said relief measures are being implemented to assist Filipinos affected by global economic pressures, particularly those arising from tensions in the Middle East. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro made the assurance as she defended the government's response to rising prices and economic uncertainty, stressing that various forms of assistance are already in place. In a press briefing, Castro hit back at Vice President Sara Duterte for claiming that the government has failed to provide sufficient relief due to political maneuvering. Castro stressed that government financial institutions are extending support even as proposals for a payment moratorium are being studied. She was referring to the Social Security System or SSS, Government Service Insurance System or GSIS, and Pag-ibig Fund, which are implementing relief measures amid a crisis in the Gulf region. She noted that the SSS has rolled out 60 billion pesos in financial assistance and benefits, including loan programs, early implementation of pension increases, and penalty condonation for members and employers. She added that the GSIS is implementing its Balik Ginhawa program, which provides a 3-month moratorium with no interest. As of the latest data, over 297,162 applications have already qualified under the program. Castro said Pag-ibig has introduced a special benefits package for repatriated overseas Filipino workers, allowing early withdrawal of savings and offering a 3-month moratorium on housing loan payment without interest or penalties. She assured the public that the government is exploring additional ways to ease the burden on affected individuals and sectors. Castro stressed that accountability issues should not be deflected, noting that concerns raised against Duterte must be addressed directly.
Ito ang mahirap sa hindi nag-aaral, hindi nagbabasa, hindi inaalam kung ano ba ang katotohanan. Nakakalungkot para sa isang public servant na lumalabas na walang alam. At wag niya pong ipahid ang mga issue ng accountability and transparency dahil may sarili po siyang issue ngayon na dapat niyang kaharapin.
Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang denied allegations of a supposed term sharing agreement between Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. and Vice President Sara Duterte following claims raised during a House hearing. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the president has no personal knowledge of any such arrangement. The allegations stem from testimony by alleged bagman Ramil Madriaga, who claimed there was a 2021 agreement for President Marcos to step down in 2025 in favor of Duterte, along with supposed contingency plans to unseat the president. President Marcos and Duterte ran and won convincingly in 2022 under the Uniteam coalition. Castro reiterated that President Marcos remains committed to completing his term. Asked about the president's reaction, Castro said President Marcos was surprised by the allegations. The allegations surfaced during a House of Representatives inquiry related to impeachment proceedings involving the vice president. On alleged threats against the president, including remarks attributed to Davao City Mayor Sebastian Duterte, Castro said these are not new but indicated that the National Bureau of Investigation or NBI should take the lead in investigating such claims.
Sa ngayon po ay alamin natin ang buong katotohanan rito. Pero ang pinag-usapan na ni Mr. Ramil Madriaga at ng dating Pangulong Duterte ay wala po tayong personal na kaalaman, kahit na ang Pangulo ay walang personal na kaalaman patungkol po dito. Ang Pangulo po ay nangampanya sa taumbayan, nangako na maglilingkod sa taumbayan at nangakong tatapusin ang kanyang termino para sa bayan. Hindi na nga po nabago ito ang pagbabanta sa buhay ng Pangulo. Sinimulan na nga po ito ng Vice Presidente, nadinig na rin po natin si Mayor Duterte. So, hindi na po kailangan mag-utos ng Pangulo para imbestigahan ito. Ang NBI po, kayo po ay nakatalagang mag-imbestiga sa mga ganitong klaseng death threats sa Pangulo. At kahit sino mang ordinaryong tao, meron po kayong obligasyon na imbestigahan ito. Ang NBI na po ang dapat na mag-imbestiga rito.
Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Palace backs Ombudsman probe into 26 lawmakers over infra anomalies. Malacañang expressed support for the ongoing investigation by the Office of the Ombudsman into 26 members of the House of Representatives allegedly linked to anomalous infrastructure projects. Speaking to reporters, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro welcomed the Ombudsman's move to investigate lawmakers for alleged involvement in public infrastructure anomalies. She said the probe reflects the government's continued commitment to fight corruption in government. She said the palace supports all efforts to hold accountable those involved in the misuse of public funds, particularly in infrastructure projects. Castro said more officials could be implicated depending on the outcome of the investigation. The Office of the Ombudsman has obtained the statements of assets, liabilities, and net worth of the 26 House members who are under investigation for their possible involvement in anomalous flood control and other infrastructure projects. The identities of the lawmakers were not disclosed.
Well, trabaho po mismo ng Ombudsman, ng DOJ, ang pag-iimbestiga po dito. So, maganda po yan na pangitain at senyales na patuloy at porsigido po ang Office of the Ombudsman na tutukan ang korupsyon na naganap kahit ngayong administrasyon na to at noong nakaraang administrasyon.
Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang dismissed the petition urging the Supreme Court to compel Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. to undergo a hair follicle drag test and release a medical bulletin, saying it lacks legal and factual basis. The petition, filed by the United People's Initiative or UPI, called for the disclosure of the president's health condition, citing the public's right to information. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro questioned the basis of the petition, describing the issue as unfounded. Castro also cited a previous Supreme Court ruling noting that a sitting president cannot be compelled to disclose medical records without substantiated claims.
Sino po bang gumawa ng issue unang-una? Hindi po ba sila? Silang gumagawa ng issue ng walang basihan. So, meron na po rin dati naging ruling ang Supreme Court patungkol po dyan sa nakaraang Pangulo. At ating ipapakitang muli, no? Isa itong article na sinulat, babangkitin ko ng pangalan, ni Mr. Ray Panaligan. Okay? So, ang Supreme Court po ay nagbigay na rin po ng desisyon patungkol po dito na hindi po kinakailangan at kailangan sapilitang magbigay ang isang Pangulo ng kanyang medical records, especially, and I quote, "Apparently, petitioner's allegation that the President is seriously ill is unsubstantiated and is based merely on petitioner's surmises and conjectures regarding his perception of the declining health of the President," referring to President Duterte at the time. So, kung puro chismis lang po ang pagbabasihan ninyo at guni-guni lamang at wala kayong anumang basihan, sa tingin po natin ang Supreme Court ay hindi naman po babaliktarin ang ganitong klaseng jurisprudence.
Also said earlier, court findings emphasized that allegations about President's health must be supported by evidence and not mere conjecture. Earlier this week, President Marcos had brushed off rumors about his health as mere lies as he performed a few jumping jacks and later ran within the palace compound alongside reporters. On the issue of transparency, Castro maintained that the administration has been open to the public.
Are we not transparent? You have seen the President working. You have seen the President reporting face-to-face, personal pa. So unless they can prove that there is serious illness, then there's no need for the President to do that based on the Supreme Court decision.
She added that in the absence of proof of serious illness, there is no legal basis to compel the president to undergo medical testing. Meanwhile, the Presidential Communications Office, PCO, Malacañang's media arm, is set to file complaints before the Department of Justice to charge individuals over the proliferation of fake news on social media about the president's health. Castro said at least 3 individuals are tagged in the complaint.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. pledged that efforts to advance the career and promote the welfare of public school teachers will be sustained under his watch. President Marcos made the vow as he led a mass oath-taking of 2,121 newly promoted teachers and principals from Eastern Visayas at the Tacloban City Convention Center in Tacloban City. Around 1,679 of the 2,121 oath-takers were promoted under the Expanded Career Progression or ECP system, while 442 were promoted under the non-ECP track. 26 of them were longest-serving teachers and 2 were beneficiaries of the Sa Pinas Ikaw ang Ma'am at Sir or SPIMS program, an initiative that supports the reintegration of licensed overseas Filipino worker teachers into the country's public school system. President Marcos said the initiatives aim to address the challenges faced by educators, prompting them to seek better opportunities in other fields. He acknowledged that some of them were even compelled to take on administrative roles for higher compensation. President Marcos stressed that the ECP system paves the way for the creation of new teaching positions to help them advance their careers with clearer direction. From August 2025 to April 2026, over 65,000 teachers school heads have been promoted. President Marcos said the government has carried out several initiatives to promote teachers' welfare, including the creation of new teaching and non-teaching positions and the release of 10,000 pesos teaching supply allowance for teachers for academic year 2025 to 2026. President Marcos emphasized the crucial role of educators in national development, especially amid global developments and geopolitical tensions. He commended the teachers for going beyond academic instruction to help students shape their own character.
All these promotions are well-deserved and will provide stability for our educators as they advance in their careers. For many, many years, our public school teachers have faced many barriers to career growth. Our old system did not have the positions and clear pathways for advancement. In some cases, you even had to step away from the thing that you love the most, teaching, in search of better opportunities in other areas, in other fields. It only worsens, that situation only worsens the shortage of teachers in the country, undermines the country's overall educational system. All of these changes we are making will strengthen our education system in the long run. These reforms will lift morale and retain our best teachers here in our country. It will also ensure that experience and talent will remain in our schools as we offer them more opportunities and better compensation. The world has become more uncertain lately, and so your role as teachers and administrators of our school are more important than ever. In times like these especially, our world needs more teachers like you, who always go beyond just academic instruction, but help students develop their own character. Always remember, as we always remember, that our future rests on the young minds that are in your hands and in your care, and that you will help nurture today so that we have a brighter tomorrow.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. led the rollout of the government's reintegration initiatives for returning overseas Filipino workers or OFWs during a regional fair in Tacloban City. The President graced the bayanihan para sa Balikbayang Manggagawa National Reintegration Network Regional Fair at the Leyte National High School Gymnasium in Tacloban City, together with the Department of Migrant Workers, DMW Secretary Hans Leo Cacdac. Government data indicated that at least 5,400 OFWs and their dependents have returned to the country, promoting intensified efforts to ensure their smooth transition back into local communities. The reintegration program consolidates services from multiple government agencies to offer employment opportunities, livelihood assistance, and access to essential social services, providing comprehensive support to OFWs affected by the ongoing crisis in the Middle East. Participating agencies included the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, Department of Education, Department of Social Welfare and Development, Department of Information and Communications Technology, Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, Department of Labor and Employment, Department of Health, and Department of Trade and Industry. Services offered during the fair included medical assistance, psychosocial counseling, skills training, livelihood support, and employment facilitation. According to the DMW, around 2,500 local and overseas job opportunities were made available through government programs in partnership with private recruitment agencies.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other news, Malacañang announced that Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has accepted the resignation of National Security Advisor Eduardo Año, who is set to retire from public service after decades in government and the military. In a statement, the palace expressed gratitude for Año's contributions, citing his role in strengthening the country's national security framework, advancing counterterrorism and internal security efforts, and ensuring coordination across the security sector amid evolving regional and global challenges. Año, a former Armed Forces of the Philippines or AFP chief and Interior and Local Government Secretary, was appointed National Security Advisor in 2023. In June 2025, the palace announced Año would remain head of the National Security Council or NSC, despite facing health issues and administration's then cabinet adjustments. The president has appointed another former AFP chief, Eduardo Oban Jr., as the new National Security Advisor. Oban is a member of the Philippine Military Academy class of 1979 and previously served as AFP Chief of Staff, Deputy Chief of Staff for Plans or J5, and head of the Visiting Forces Agreement Commission. He served as AFP Chief under the administration of the late former President Benigno Noynoy Aquino III from March 8, 2011 to December 12, 2011. Malacañang said Oban's extensive background in military operations, defense planning, and national security will ensure continuity in government efforts to safeguard the country.
The President has accepted the resignation of National Security Advisor Eduardo Año. Secretary Año has decided to retire from public service after decades of continuous service in government and the military. We thank Secretary Año for his dedicated and distinguished service to the Filipino people. As National Security Advisor, he played a key role in strengthening our national security framework, advancing our counterterrorism and internal security efforts, and ensuring close coordination across the security sector during a period of evolving regional and global challenges. His leadership has helped maintain stability and protect the welfare of our citizens. The President has appointed Eduardo Oban Jr. as his successor. Secretary Oban is a former Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and a graduate of Philippine Military Academy class of 1979. He has extensive experience in military operations, defense planning, and national security, having also served as Deputy Chief of Staff for Plans, J5, and head of the Visiting Forces Agreement Commission. With this depth of experience, the President is confident that Secretary Oban will provide steady and capable leadership in advancing the country's national security priorities and ensuring continuity in the government's efforts to keep the nation safe and secure.
Palace Press Officer Attorney Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
And that is all for today's Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this has been Bea Gaza-de Guzman.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.